my name's Hercules. I know it's a strange name, but you try going to school with that name back in the 60s. It's going to toughen you up one way or another. And plus, people don't forget your name easily, makes it very handy in business or when you're dealing with a service. They know who you are. Now, what I brought you all here is to tell you my life story. And from there on, get to know me. And I really believe this is the best way for people to get to know each other. Now, this is going to be the first chapter. It's between 0 and 10. Okay, so let's start from the first moment I realized I was me. The first memory I have is when I'm in a cot. And I know I'm in a cot because I'm teething and I'm chewing the wood on the edges of the cot. And also, I was chewing my toenails. They were so soft, and I could get my foot into my mouth. And just after I'd finished chewing my nails, I'd chew my toenails off. And also, something else I remember, they moved my cot next to the window, and I was chewing, there was a hole in the wall, in the plaster, and I was taking pieces and chewing them. Oh, it was fun. I got all these vitamins.
How
I was about 2.5 at that moment. I know I was 2.5. And when my parents wanted to make love, they throw a sheet over the top of the bed, my cot, and tell me something, play with me, carry on, like you got your own little house. And I was busy playing with my toys. I wasn't really listening what was happening outside. Didn't take much notice of that. Now, my other memories beyond that, there are things in between, but then the shocking ones stand out the most. Those shocking memories that you end up getting. And one of my first shocking memories was I was about 3.5 years old. And my grandmother, the one who got my mother and father together, the one who picked my mother in Greece and sent her over to marry her son, that grandmother was invited to Australia. She had 3 sons there at the time, and she tried living with the older one, the one who actually brought her over. Seems like there were problems. I found that out later on. Second one couldn't put up with her as well, so finally she gets to our house and moves in to my room. She gets a cot under the window, I get the wall. And she was left there to babysit me while my parents were working. They were working shifts. If they could work shifts, they would work shifts. That's back in the 60s. Australia, Melbourne had a lot of manufacturing. So I was left in her hands. Now remember, I'm 3.5, I'm not going to school. And one of my most horrible memories was I could hear my parents take off and go to work. And then I was alone with her, and she'd call me over to her bed. And she'd make me sit on her stomach. And then she'd pull out a pin, a hat pin, with a big pearl on the end of it, Now that hat pin was probably as big as this cigar. And she would make me put my hands out like that. And she'd take the pin and start pricking me with it. Pricking. And if I tried to move my hands, I don't remember what she did. I think she slapped me. So I had to keep my hands out there. Now I'm 3.5 years old. 3.5 years old. Basically a little kid. I don't know what I did wrong, but basically, I won't do that again, Grandma. You're not going to do this again. No, I'm not going to do that again. She just kept pricking. And I remember looking at my hands at a later time and it was all little red dots, little sores all over the place. I don't know why my parents didn't see this. I'm surprised. Excuse me. And one time I remember she tied me to a post outside. I'd done something like a child probably did. And she tied me to the post. It was summertime and it was hot. I remember that. And she made me beg and beg and beg. Most of the time she had me begging. And then she'd drag me around the neighborhood. She'd go harass the neighbors. This is a ghetto, right? And it's all full of migrant families and poor Anglo-Saxon families, council people, the drug addicts. And we had a murder there every year. It was an annual thing. For Melbourne, that's pretty hard for a neighbourhood. Well, there was one pub one corner, and there was another pub in the other corner, and there was one pub down at the other corner. So we had 3 pubs up the street. We had alcoholics rolling around. We had bar fights. They'd come out into the streets and throw stuff at each other. And for us kids, it was a show. It was a show to watch these adults carrying on badly. Very badly. Now, where was I? Grandma. Well, eventually, she didn't last too long. She ended up having a stroke, and she passed away, and they buried her there in Melbourne. From there, I remember my mother, again, my favourite person in life. My mother. Well, she tried to train me and teach me how to lie. I wasn't very good at that. And, well, let's say she tried. But my uncle, yes.
How old you went to school?
Yes. I went to school at the age of 4. I went to school at the age of 4. Why did I go at the age of 4 when I was supposed to go at the age of 5? Because Mum wanted to save money from the babysitters in the neighbourhood that she was paying to take care of me while she was at work. I got passed around by a few neighbours. These were housewives that had their own kids who might have just had given birth and couldn't leave the house, so they would take on other people's children, make some extra money. And that's how it happened back then. I learnt Italian at one lady. I think I was there for a year or so, and she actually taught me Italian. And we could communicate in Italian. It's fascinating. That was going to be my 3rd language. So, Mum sent me off to school at the age of 4, made me promise that I wasn't going to tell anybody that I was 4. She'd kicked up a year. So I started school. All the other kids were bigger than me. And it was a struggle to keep up with them. You know what was the struggle? I was also dyslexic. That was the only issue I had. Mentally, I was there. There was no issue because I grew up on that street in front of the house. And that woke me up quite a fair bit. Plus, I was happy to go to school. I was pretty happy to go to school. And at the same time, as I got older, I was going to Greek school. So I was learning both languages at the same time. For a dyslexic, that's pretty bad. I could speak both languages fluently. I can read if I concentrate, but don't get me to spell. I'm completely lost in space there. But what's next?
Your mother was teaching you to lie.
Oh yes, my mother was teaching me to lie. And how she did this, she liked to have secrets from my father. Ridiculous things. I know they were just ridiculous. It wasn't anything. And she wanted me to keep secrets. And also, when my uncles and aunties came around, they asked questions. She expected me to lie on certain subjects. But my uncle, which was a younger brother, knew her pretty well. And he would corner me at some point and then ask me the question and look at me straight in the face. And I liked this uncle. He was a good young man. And I couldn't lie to him. Plus, he looked like a Greek icon, one of those icons you see in the churches. He had that long face with the long nose, and he looked saintly to me. So I couldn't lie to him. And then he'd turn around and have a go at my mum for teaching me to lie and keep secrets and stuff. And my mum, I don't know, they had their own words. And from there, where am I?
He was taking your gifts.
Oh yes, my birthday gifts and Christmas gifts that I would be getting from uncles and aunties. This is funny. It gets funny as it goes along through the years. But she used to carefully unwrap them in front of everybody, put the wrapping away safely, okay? And then open the box, take the toy out, give it to me, let me play with it a little bit while everybody was around. And then when they left, it was gone. It was repackaged, the whole thing, and then she'd put it up high on the top of her cupboard in her bedroom. And I remember some of the gifts were really nice. I'd gotten towels once with soaps that they'd gotten me, some people, and so many of my gifts ended up on top of that cupboard. And you know why she saved those gifts? So she can re-give them. So she wouldn't have to go and buy a present. She would re-give them. And I think at one point she got busted because she got confused and she gave the wrong present back, or it was their gift to me and it'd been a few years or something, and then they saw it and that blew her away. I know it blew her away, and I was happy that was over, because then I started getting to keep my toys. But I was too old by then. I was too old to really be into the toys and stuff that people bought me. But I did got to keep them, yeah. As I was growing up, I got to keep the toys. I think something bad happened to her. And there were periods when my parents would send me off and I'd stay at my uncle's houses. And they'd be raising me for long periods of time because I'd have to go to school. And they would never tell me why. You understand? And I never found out why, even through the years. They never said it was for this reason or that reason. I think they were having issues between themselves. And where am I now?
Your father was an enabler and he wanted you to be a wrestler. He was obsessed.
My father, the enabler. He's the guy, whenever I went to him with a complaint about my mother, he'd say to me, your mother's a saint. She's a complete saint. You couldn't get a better mother than that. And I still couldn't work it out because I was comparing her with the Brady Bunch mother and the Partridge Family mother. And I thought, nah, my mum is nowhere near those wonderful women. I don't know what he sees in her. But anyway, my father, the enabler. Well, my father was obsessed with muncho crap. And one thing he was obsessed with was championship wrestling, which was on TV on the weekends. He actually used to take me to the wrestling matches. That's the sort of deadhead he was. And when I was little, he trained me to go and headbutt doors, walls, different surfaces. And he'd laugh and say, when you grow up, you're going to be a wrestler. And then when my uncles would come, he'd get them all around. I could just hear him calling my name out in the distance, saying, Iraklis, which is the Greek version of Hercules. Hello. And I knew what he wanted. He wanted me to headbutt something. And all my uncles would sit there and watch me headbutt cupboard doors and things like that. And they'd all laugh and giggle like it was okay. It was all okay to watch this little kid. Sometimes I'd whack my head so hard, I'd get this, whistling dullness of the whack in my head. That happened quite a few times, especially as I was growing up. Fights, different stuff, falling, hitting. That happened quite a few times. But this wrestling thing, I don't get it. But getting a child to whack its head on the wall, to whack its head on the cupboard door or the door or somewhere, some surface, just so the adults can stand around and giggle. They giggled. They were like children. I started to realize at that age that these guys, these adults, are just grown-up children. That's all they were to me. I was starting to see adults as children. And they were children, I swear. And I haven't changed my opinion of them. Yes, my father, the guy who used to sit down and scratch his ass, he did it to me quite a few times. And then with his stinky finger, he'd come and stick it over my mouth and laugh when I'm going, fuck, oh, it stinks. And I'm a little kid. And he's doing shit like this to me. I don't know what was in their heads. Yeah. I really don't know what was in their heads. Well, I lived through all that. I lived through the streets and everything out there that was going on. And the school, at one stage, everybody used to beat into me. I mean, there was so much abuse. At school, I'd be into fights, and the teachers would beat us. At home, our parents would beat us. Out in the street, I did okay. Not much happening out in the street, fights. It was mostly at school and at home, all the violence. In the street, I could handle myself. I was a pretty okay kid. They could trust me. I was honest. I got along really well. I was comfortable in my neighbourhood. I stayed in that neighbourhood till I was 10. And I learnt how to just be honest with people. And you get along with everybody. We had little gangs and stuff like that. And the older kids would create gangs, but they wouldn't bother us younger kids. We were the same neighbourhood. We were okay. I don't know what sort of gangs they were. Oh, and across the road from my house, they were pulling all the houses down. These are all old terrace houses. Our house was 150 years old at that time, from what I know. And the ones across the road, they were pulling them all down and building these new yuppie ones from modern people. Because I was in the inner city area of Fitzroy, North Fitzroy, in Melbourne, and that land was worth a fortune.
When did you start raising your sister?
My sister. When I was 7, my sister came around, and I was so excited. I enjoyed the pregnancy. I enjoyed the enthusiasm, and as if my mother knew that she was going to have a daughter for some reason. So my little sister's coming. And one night, I remember this, I could hear her making noise and saying blah, 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 blah. And they took off, the two of them. And I was left home alone. And my dad comes home in the morning. And it was daytime, really early in the morning. And he says to me, "You've got a little sister." And I was so happy I had a little sister. I needed company. I was alone, basically, with myself. I didn't mix too much with the kids. I just playtime. But mostly my thoughts and all that stuff, that was personal. Completely personal. I grew up that way. Nothing weird or strange. It was just me being me. I could depend on my inner self, myself. I learned to depend on myself. You understand? And my decisions were made and everything on my own moral compass and my own moral ground. I know they tell you what's right, they tell you what's wrong. But still, I like to bend things a little bit too. Play with that. Just to have an experience. I wasn't a bad kid, but I always seemed to get myself in trouble. Don't know why. Looking at myself, I see a child that just wants to grow up and is excited about life. Not like the other children that do bugger all. You know, they get domesticated really quick. I wasn't domesticated at all. They couldn't domesticate me. So my sister comes along and I end up, because my mum wanted to save money, she would get me after school to pick up my sister, take her home and take care of her while mum and dad were doing their overtime, like always. So I'd feed her, I'd change her, get her all ready. I'd play with her as she was growing up. She'd reached the age of about, a year and a half, 2 years old. She struggled to walk. She took her a long time to walk. And I loved playing with her and taking care of her. It was a real person I was taking care of. I had a responsible job, and I'm 7 years old, 8, 9, and I'm responsible for this person. Because I was playing so much with my sister and giving her so much attention, because mum would come back from work, she'd head to the kitchen, and I'm still playing with my sister, keeping her company and enjoying it all. Well, when she started standing up, my mum decided to play this game. And she put her on the edge of a couch, and she was holding on at the other corner of the room. And she's holding on, and she could do a few steps at that time. So I'm in one corner, my mum's somewhere else, and my father's somewhere else. And we're all calling her at that time so she can start walking, really. And I call her over and she kept coming to me. She kept coming to me because I was the one always helping her with her walk. My mother saw it differently. She gave me that stare of death. And I could see the envy and the jealousy in her eyes. And I basically realized it's not my fault. I didn't. What's wrong with my mother? Doesn't she want us to be in love, taking care of each other? You know, don't you want to see your children have this relationship? Seems not. And from there on, she put me in the she started putting me in difficult positions as I was growing up. I used to get punished, and they locked me up under the stairs in this mouldy, smelly place. And the first time they stuck me in there, when I was little, I was scared. But because the boards had shrunken on this door, there were cracks, big cracks, and I could see the light going right through. So all I had to do was put my eye and look straight through, and I wasn't in that space anymore. So I was quite comfortable in there after a while, no matter how many times. So they stopped doing that. Then that's when they started beating me. Mum would use cooking spoons and any other cooking utensils she can get her hands on to beat me. And my dad would use his belt because it was hurting his hand to beat me with his hand. That's how muncho he was. And then from there on...
When did you start wagging school?
Wagging school, yes. Then I started, at some point, I'd started wagging school by myself, taking off. I'd started once every 2 weeks, and I would take off and go into the city, go to other neighborhoods and just walk around. I would learn more from just walking around the city because the city was so close and I had so many hours. Plus, I'd been given a watch because I had my sister to take care of. So I had learnt time. And I was able to take off into the city and make it back home. And the walk was only 1 hour one way and 1 hour back for me. And all the stuff I saw, even on rainy days, it didn't have to be a nice sunny day or anything. Even on the worst days, weather, I would do these trips. And I just absorbed so much watching people go to work, make that building sites where I could just look through and just watch them working in there. There was so much education, and all those kids at school were getting dumbed down.
Was that your playground?
The playground was where I used to fight. The playground is where I used to fight. That's where I came to another realization in my life. Because of my name, I had to fight. I couldn't stand down, and I didn't have an issue with bullies. Bullies wouldn't bully me. I was a ghetto kid, and I was well built. I was full when I was young, and I was able to take care of myself. I did good. I did. I always stood up with bullies. Nobody bullied me. And that makes a hell of a difference. And to learn this at such a young age and stand up for yourself is a head start, a complete head start in life. And the next one would be?
School and street fighting.
School and street fighting, yes. What I did realise with the fighting was, especially at school, at school I realised all the different personalities of the human being. I saw them. Before they put personas on, as they grew up, I saw them for what they were as a child. Every personality, every phobia, every hang-up, all these strange little people running around, and none of them really having any balls. Most of them were bullied, easily bullied and pushed around. They were obedient, like cattle, domesticated, completely destroyed. And I was so alive. I started wagging at, once every 2 weeks, and then I started every week. By the time I was about 10, I was doing pretty good with my wagging. And I was getting groups together to go out with. But I'd rather do it on my own. I didn't like going out with the other kids and doing their mischievous stuff that we would get up to. I didn't like because it would get us in trouble, and that would spoil those days off that we would take. And why I took days off? Because the teachers couldn't give a rat's ass about us migrant kids. We come to school. We don't come to school. They don't care. That's what I realised. They didn't give a rat's ass. And they wouldn't even ask for a note. I'd go back to school, and if they asked for a note, I'd say, I'll bring one tomorrow. And I would write a note out. And because I knew my mother's signature she would write in capitals somehow. I could copy her signature easily because her English was bad. She would try to do her signature in English. So I did counterfeiting when I was a kid. I did a lot of counterfeiting. I would counterfeit lunch passes and things like that as I grew up. I even counterfeited my birth certificate because I didn't think it was fair that I was 16 and I was going to get paid less but do the same job as an 18-year-old. So I Xeroxed it, changed it, and produced a birth certificate, made me older so I can get a fair pay because I'm doing exactly the same amount of work. That's how I fight the system. That's how I fought the system. Anyway, what else have we got there?
You steal money to buy coloring.
Ah, yes. What I was never given was basically pocket money. That was a begging competition. That was seriously a begging competition if I wanted to go and get something from the milk bar as a kid. All the kids at school would get pocket money. Most of them, I know, would. And they would go and get Chico rolls, they'd get dim sims, chips sometimes from the local shops that were across the road from the school. And one had colouring textures and pencils. And that's what I was obsessed with. I wanted those colouring textures and pencils. And my parents wouldn't buy me them. So I stole money from my dad's pocket. He used to hang his trousers out in the passageway. So it was easy. I'd stick my hand in the pocket and grab, I don't know what the money was back then. I didn't even know the value of that money. I did it a few times And I couldn't take my texters and my pencils home. I kept them at school in my desk. And when my father confronted me about this, I told him the truth. Yes, and I did it. And he actually came to the school, or my mum came, I can't remember, and they got him. I showed him to him. I opened my desk up, and there was the colouring stuff. I think there were colouring books as well that I bought. And I must have been about 9. That's when my drawing skills kicked in. I was starting to become an artist, and I could draw eventually. By the time I was 10, 11, I could draw. I could look at the comic book and off I went. Easy stuff. Good hand-eye coordination, they call that. And I still use it today, those skills, in my profession. What else have we got going?
You moved house.
By the time I was 10, my parents had paid off the house with all that overtime and all that stinginess. I had to wear it. I mean, I'd only get one pair of shoes and one pair of pants a year, if I was lucky, because some years I'd still have the same pants and Mum had to let them down. I lived like a pauper. We lived like paupers, seriously, and we didn't have to. We seriously didn't have to live like that. Anyway, let's move on. I think that's basically some of the spots in my childhood. A lot of violence. A lot of violence. But I was happy in myself. I was happy with who I was. I didn't look at the other kids and be envious of what they were. So I was happy with who I was. Plus, I had so many skills that they didn't. I could cook, I could do this, I could do that. These kids knew nothing of all this stuff. No way. And something else in my house. When something broke, it stayed broke. These people couldn't fix nothing. My dad couldn't put a picture up on the wall, man. He tried to hammer a nail in and he'd destroy the plaster. And he'd create a hole completely, trying to put one nail in. The old plasters in those old houses were so old and brittle. You'd have to know what you're doing to get it right. Anyway, nothing to learn there. At the age of 10, they managed to pay off the house. They sell it for something like $15,000. And they go off because the factory where my father worked was moving to East Preston. He went along with the factory. And we moved to East Preston. Just, I would say, a half an hour walk from the factory. And another half an hour walk or so to my school, which was across the road from the factory. In the middle was a race course where they put trots, where they train horses. So there was a factory on one side, CIG, and then there were the trots with the horses, and across the road from the trots was the school. Next to the school was Northland, perfect place to put a shopping centre next to a school. And then across the road from Northland, next to the trots, was the drive-in. Everything was there. Everything was there. That's the neighbourhood I moved into. But that's another chapter. And that one's going to be exciting because that's where all the growing up happened. finding myself and understanding myself, I'd done that by the time I was 10. I knew a lot of my capabilities, strengths, weaknesses, what I had to work on. So, let's move into my teen years on chapter 2. I promise you, chapter 2 is going to be exciting. That's when all the shit went down.